President Joe Biden was speaking in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he specifically focused on the importance of maintaining our democratic process and strengthening our elections to ensure that everyone who wants to vote gets the opportunity to do so. Now, as we know, there are several states that are either in the process of passing restrictive voting laws, or in the case of Georgia, they've already done so. And so in that context, Joe Biden decided to bring up two Democratic senators who have been giving him a tough time in passing his agenda. Let's take a look.
I urge voting rights groups in this country to begin to redouble their efforts now to register and educate voters. And in June should be a month of action on Capitol Hill. I hear all the folks on TV saying, why doesn't Biden get this done? Well, because Biden only has a majority of effectively 4 votes in the House and a tie in the Senate, with 2 members of the Senate who vote more with my Republican friends. But we're not giving up. Earlier this year, the House of Representatives passed For the People Act to protect our democracy. The Senate will take it up later this month, and I'm going to fight like heck with every tool at my disposal for its passage.
Okay, so small note because I can't help myself. The phrase "fight like heck" is just don't do it. Don't use that phrase because it makes it seem like you're not gonna fight at all. Fight like heck is like, yeah, I'm gonna give it my best shot, you hear? But anyway, I thought it was interesting that for the first time, Biden felt the need to say something mildly aggressive in regard to 2 Democratic senators. Obviously, he didn't name them by name, but I think it's safe to assume he's talking about Senators Sinema and Joe Manchin, who have really served as a giant obstacle in getting much done in the Senate. Many of the pieces of legislation that get to the Senate, they're passed by the democratically controlled House. They get to the Senate, where Democrats, of course, have a very slim majority with Kamala Harris as the tie-breaking vote. And you would need all Democratic senators to agree on voting in favor of legislation if it's going to be done through reconciliation, if it's a budgetary piece of legislation. But if it's any other piece of legislation, for instance, the For the People Act, which reforms our elections, gets money out of politics, secures our elections by ensuring that voting machines aren't connected to the internet, by ensuring that there's a paper ballot, all of that stuff needs to pass with 60 senators in the Senate. And that is impossible to do when Senator Mitch McConnell, the former Senate Majority Leader, has made it abundantly clear that he prioritizes fighting Biden every step of the way. So the only thing that we have left to do, the only thing that Senate Democrats can do in order to pass important legislation like the For the People Act is by either reforming or doing away with the Senate filibuster, which again requires 60 senators to vote in favor of legislation like the For the People Act. But unfortunately, we're still dealing with Manchin and Sinema saying that under no circumstances are they willing to do away with the filibuster. In fact, just today, Sinema said in a video that's now gone viral on Twitter that I'm a daily example that bipartisanship is working. How exactly has she made that assessment? I'm very curious, because in order to claim that you are a shining example of how bipartisanship is working, you should be able to note what legislation you were able to pass in a bipartisan way. Bipartisanship is not working when you have Republican leadership, like Mitch McConnell, for instance, saying that his priority is to fight Biden's agenda every step of the way. There is not a culture of bipartisanship in the Senate. There's no culture of bipartisanship, even when it comes to something that honestly all lawmakers should be able to agree on, which is doing an investigation into what happened in our nation's capital on January 6th. What were the flaws in our system? Why do we have white supremacists in police ranks, for instance, in Capitol Police? Why were they posing with some of the Capitol rioters on that day? Like, these are things that should be debated, investigated, discussed. But Sinema couldn't even bother to show up to vote on a 9/11 style commission to investigate what happened in the nation's capital. Now, I do want to point to one thing that Biden said that is hilarious to me, mostly because the mainstream media fact checkers immediately jumped on it because it's honestly easy picking, it's low-hanging fruit. Biden says that these two senators tend to vote with Republicans more often than Democrats. Obviously, that's hyperbole. Obviously, that is not necessarily true. But I do think that Biden is trying to touch on something that is important to keep in mind in regard to this whole myth of bipartisanship and how Democrats can successfully work toward bipartisanship. Now, both Manchin and Sinema have basically said, we're not gonna do away with the filibuster. In fact, we wanna do things in a bipartisan way. So you have Joe Manchin literally securing what Republicans want in cuts to the unemployment program and the coronavirus relief package, additional means testing to limit the number of Americans who qualified for the stimulus as part of that coronavirus relief package. And after he did all that, after he worked with Republicans and gave them the concessions that they demanded, what happened? How many of them voted in favor of the coronavirus relief package? How many Republican lawmakers? There were approximately zero Republican lawmakers who voted in favor of that. So what I think Biden's trying to get at, and obviously I might be putting words in his mouth, but my read of what he was saying there was, look, we have these Democratic lawmakers in the Senate who are more interested in working with Republicans in their bad faith attempts at passing legislation than fighting to secure what we need to get done in this country. Think about the infrastructure bill. Think about the American Families Plan. Every step of the way, we've seen Republican lawmakers lie about what the legislation proposes, lie about the economic impacts of that legislation should it pass. They have served as an obstacle because they have told the American people in a very transparent way what their priority is. We're gonna fight Biden and his policies every step of the way. That is the priority. So any Democratic lawmaker who claims that they're doing things in the tradition of bipartisanship, it's a lie. I don't know what Kyrsten Sinema thinks she's doing. I don't know what Joe Manchin thinks he's doing. I mean, just yesterday while I was talking about this very topic with Ryan Grimm, he said that there are some Democratic lawmakers who think that there's some three-dimensional chess going on. These Democratic senators are trying to present themselves as individuals who are really bending over backwards to succeed in a bipartisan way. But the second that it's very clear to the American people, Democrats and Republicans, that nothing's gonna get passed in a bipartisan way, that's when they're gonna turn and say that they're going to either reform or do away with the filibuster. I don't know if I'm buying that argument. Just today, there was more discussion about what the Senate parliamentarian had to say regarding the number of bills that can pass through reconciliation, which only requires a simple majority to pass a piece of legislation. Who cares what the parliamentarian has to say? We never hear about the parliamentarian until Democrats are in charge. We didn't hear about the parliamentarian during the Trump administration. We didn't really hear much about the parliamentarian at all until there were debates about the coronavirus relief bill. And the vice president, Kamala Harris, can easily overrule the parliamentarian. So when you hear Democrats cite arbitrary parliamentarian rulings on legislation and they treat it as if it's the gospel, it really makes you question how sincere they are in wanting to get their agenda passed. And honestly, the next time you hear Senator Sinema or Manchin claim that they've accomplished something in a bipartisan way, reporters need to ask the follow-up. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Here's what Mitch McConnell had to say about what the Republicans' priority is. So what is your response to that? And how do you honestly beef up your argument that you're succeeding in bipartisanship? There is no evidence of that right now. So that's where we're at. I don't know if this is the beginning of the Biden administration applying pressure to Democratic lawmakers like Sinema and Manchin, but I do want to know what you think. So we have a poll on this, and here's what the question is. Is this the beginning of Biden challenging Manchin and Sinema more aggressively? That's the question. Go to tyt.com/polls to answer that question. You got two answers, or two possible answers, and that's yes or no. Again, the question is this the beginning of Biden challenging Manchin and Sinema more aggressively, yes or no? I mean, I want to be optimistic and think that this is the beginning of a much needed trend with the Biden administration, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.